Well, you'll notice that I have a special guest with me here today, and if this fella next to me looks a lot like me, it's because this is my twin brother. This is Lee Carter, Dr. Lee Carter. He has his degree in counseling psychology, but through the years, he's worked in hospital settings and wound up going to court for various reasons. And for the last 25 plus years, he spends almost all of his time working with cases, evaluating people who are in a lot of criminal difficulty. He works with judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys and parole boards and people like that. And he handles the big boy cases. These are the difficult ones. So, Lee, first of all, thank you for being here with us.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Well, one of the things that you and I talk about, and we talk shop quite a bit, is there's a lot of connection between narcissism and the sociopath. And what I'd like to do is let's talk first, because we have a lot of people that know people of a sociopathic nature in more of a lay situation. And then I want you to kind of dovetail and talk about how that compares with what you see in the prison situation. But when we talk about a sociopathic person, even if they're not in prison, what are some of the primary characteristics that we watch for? And then how does that link up with narcissism?
Well, there's actually been books written about the sociopath next door, a person who lives and works amongst us. They have all of the telltale qualities of somebody that you might see in jail or prison, and yet they remain on this side of the law for the most part. They may cheat on their taxes, cheat on their wife, those kind of things, but they stay out of the court system and they stay out of legal trouble. But they still are heavily self-focused to the point that rules are meant for other people besides themselves. And the emphasis is on me being in control and you doing what I think you need to do to satisfy me.
Now, let's see if you would agree with me. Obviously, narcissism, exploitive behavior, manipulative behavior, sense of entitlement, need for control, like you mentioned, low empathy. But then you're kind of implying that there's a whole lot of pushback against any kind of accountability and authority and moral codes and things like that. Would that be a pretty accurate way to put it?
Yes.
So once you cross that line, then you're going into the direction of sociopathy.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so when you do an evaluation, what kind of things are you looking for? And specifically, I know most of us want to know, how does somebody become that way? What kind of things and ingredients in their backgrounds do you watch for?
Well, not everybody that commits a crime is a sociopath. Almost by default, a heavy percentage of people who commit crimes are self-focused, meaning they are narcissistic. And a lot of them are pretty cold-hearted and cold-blooded. One of the things I find in the background, the history of these individuals, is that at some point along the way, their attachments went south. Their attachments to other people is what I mean. And they didn't feel satisfied or properly loved in their key relationships. They didn't learn how advantageous it is to demonstrate love, affection,
down
care.
at the heart level.
Right. And those skills were missing. And so, as a default measure, they just kind of did what they wanted to do without a care or concern about what damage it might make. They turned off their emotions somehow, some way.
Turned off their emotions and turned off their conscience.
Yes.
Okay. Now, many times you are called in to determine if somebody who has been in prison for quite a while might be safe to be released, mm-hmm. and you're called in to testify to their competence relative to that. Can a sociopathic narcissist change? Do they?
Yeah, we refer to the term narcissistic injury, and you see that in prisons a lot. A person has been held accountable for something they may have done a number of years ago, and it was bad. And as a result of sitting by yourself, coming to grips with the harsh realities of what you did, people can and do change. You contrast that to somebody who lives on the outside of prison walls, and if you don't have that injury, if you're not called to answer for your crimes or your flaws or whatever it is you've done to hurt other people, you continue on in that path.
So in other words, people who are not called under or brought into the criminal system, it's kind of like, hey, I'm kind of getting away with this.
Well, and I've had a number of people who've been incarcerated for a while say to me, you know what? Coming to prison was the best thing that ever happened to me because I was on a self-destructive path and didn't recognize it or care about it. And in here, you have to come to terms with who you are. I remember one man, he and I got into a conversation somehow about the prodigal son. And he felt like he was the prodigal son who was ready to go home. He was tired of the life he had lived. He was tired of the person he had become. And he truly felt hurt, injured, and wanted to change, and did change.
So you felt like he indeed had come to terms with who he was, and he left prison a different kind of person?
Yeah, and I see cases like that. And, those are, of course, always gratifying, but they're not always that way.
Now, I'm assuming that's the exception to the rule.
Go ahead.
And like I say, the people who don't get caught, they just keep going on and on and on. What I was going to ask you is, now have you seen cases where people will say, oh yeah, I've changed, and then maybe not?
One of the things I have found is if you get a person talking long enough time, their real personality will sometimes come out, or oftentimes come out. I had a case where I met with a man for about 5 hours who had committed a murder and had not had a single disciplinary infraction the entire time he'd been in prison. And his attorney was excited about that. And he thought, this guy surely has changed. He tells me he has, and we'll be able to use this to his advantage to hopefully gain an early release. Well, the guy and I started talking about what he did numerous years ago and all of the events and relationships leading up to that. And the more we talked about it, the uglier this fella's disposition became. And he showed me his true colors and fell apart on me and yelled and screamed. And he wasn't really upset with me.
Knowing full well that you were there with a lot of clout.
Well, he knew why I was there. Thankfully, It was all protected by his attorney-client privilege. But when we got finished, he said, "So, Doc, what do you think?" And I called him by his first name. I said, "Well, I've read reports done by other people, my counterparts from numerous years ago, saying that you were a sociopath and that you're narcissistic and you're a malignant narcissist." And I agree with him. And he was upset, but he shook my hand and said, "At least you're honest with me."
Okay. Now, what strikes me about that story is his asking the question, "So, Doc, what do you think?" As if, I'm a pretty impressive person, aren't I? And surely you can overlook some of that other stuff. And that's what amazes me.
But you know what? I think deep down that fella and a lot of narcissists know, I'm not a nice guy. I know I'm not. But I hope everybody thinks I am. I hope I can fool them into believing I am. What do you think, Doc? I think you're still a narcissist and you're a danger to the public.
Okay, now.
Okay, you're honest with me.
Now, one of the things that I know you've mentioned that all of us have a need to feel understood. Okay, now you have a unique way of looking at that, at comparing a normal individual with a sociopathic narcissist about our need to feel understood. What do you say there?
Okay, let's say you and I are talking, and we do talk about personal matters a lot, and I walk away thinking, it felt good to be understood by my own brother. That's a real healthy feeling. It's a gratifying feeling. It's a healing feeling. The narcissist will walk away thinking, that person understood me. It's not about me feeling understood. It's about him understanding that I'm in charge. I'm in control. My point of view takes precedent over everybody else's.
Okay,
and so the term understanding takes on a different point or a different light for the narcissist than it does the ordinary person.
Okay, and again, the narcissist has that need to be the one that's superior, the one that's understood to be the better one here. And then when we add the sociopathy to it, and it's like, and nobody tells me what to do. I have, the morality that I may have lived with yesterday is going to change today because I have different kinds of issues in front of me, and no need for accountability. So understanding from their vantage point is an entirely different kind of an issue.
Yeah, it's defined differently.
Okay. Now, one thing before we wrap, if you're somebody that lives with or engages with somebody, whether it's you're married to them or someone in your extended family or work, how do we need to approach these individuals?
Okay, well, I live by a lot of different little sayings. I know you do too. One of my favorite sayings is, "It's not my job to fix things. It's not my job to fix you. You can only fix you. I can't." And when we understand that, that gives us a sense of objectivity that allows us to step back when we need to from the narcissists in our life and quit trying to fix them, because they're not going to be fixed by anything you or I might do. They have to fix themselves, and if they're not in a position where they want to, they're not going to.
Would you agree with me? Sometimes the best thing to do is just no contact, get out of their lives?
Or, even if it's not possible to get out of that person's life, at least to maintain some emotional separation. Your peace of mind has to be taken into account. And trying to fix a person who is hurt and damaged in that way is only going to bring you greater anxiety and harm.
Yeah, I think it's so important for us as we wrap here today to understand that these are very broken people, and they're broken people who want to break you. And that being the case, you have to practice self-care, because they're certainly not going to, because morality means nothing to them, and empathy and those kind of things are just non-existent. So we have to practice self-care. So, well, thank you for being here with us. Lee, I'm pleased that you came in and kind of give us a little bit of an overview of some of the things you watch for. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, I encourage you to go below, and we'll keep you apprised of more videos that come along. Sometimes when you see videos such as this, it kind of reminds you of some things that are a part of your life, and you want to break it down with a counselor. And we have we're working with a sponsor that we've vetted, that we trust very well, and we have a link for online counseling that would be below. And if that's something you need to seek out, then I would encourage you to do so. We also have links to my online video workshops and books, and even coffee mugs. So let's go with what Lee's talking about. Understand what you're dealing with, practice that self-care, and just know that someone has to be the healthy one in the equation. You can't afford to tangle up with somebody who has this low manner of living with individuals. So be the one that stands for dignity and respect and civility. Live with your own good self-care. Be the positive change.